He locked me in a luxury room and said, "Leave the jar. And you'll come out alive." There are 1,000 paper cranes inside, and each one is made up of other people's checks and letters. I thought it was just a strange gift from an old man. And then I saw why the manager was ready to kill me, because it wasn't origami. These are his crimes, hidden in plain sight. The crystal chandelier overhead cast fractured rainbows across the silk wallpaper of Suite 404, but Clara saw none of its beauty. Her fingers ached from gripping the heavy glass jar pressed against her ribs, the weight of 1,000 paper cranes multiplying with every racing heartbeat. The suite smelled of expensive lilies wilting in their vases and the acrid bite of cigar smoke that clung to the velvet curtains like a stain. Mr. Thorne stepped inside and slid the deadbolt home. The click reverberated through Clara's chest cavity. She had cleaned this room 317 times in the past 2 years. She could navigate it blind, could tell you the exact number of floorboards that creaked under the Persian rugs, could describe the pattern of water stains hidden behind the gilt-framed paintings. But standing in its center now, with her employer's shadow falling across the thick carpets, the suite transformed into something else entirely. A velvet-lined trap. "Set it down, Mr. Thorne's voice carried none of its usual polished authority. His silk tie hung loose around his throat, and an oily sheen of perspiration coated his forehead despite the room's carefully controlled temperature. "Set down the jar, Clara, and we can resolve this situation with minimal fuss." Clara shifted her weight, her worn shoe squeaking against the marble entryway. "I'm resigning, Mr. Thorne. I'll waive my final paycheck. I simply want to leave with what Mr. Sterling gave me." "Nothing from Sterling's tenure leaves this building." The words exploded from him, too sharp, too frantic. His gaze fixed on the jar with an intensity that made Clara's stomach clench. "The paper is contaminated. Health code violations. Sanitation concerns." But his eyes weren't scanning the glass for germs. They were locked on the tiny, angular characters visible through the transparent walls, the handwritten notations creeping across certain folds like secrets whispered in ink. Mr. Thorne moved toward the housekeeping cart parked near the window. His fingers closed around the heavy oak broom handle. Clara watched, her breath shallow, as he positioned the wood across his knee. The crack of splintering oak ricocheted off the vaulted ceiling like a gunshot. He held up the jagged, broken piece, its raw end trailing splinters, and stepped between Clara and the only exit visible in the room. "You're a smart girl." His knuckles whitened around the improvised weapon. "Smart enough to understand when things become irreparably messy for someone's future. Employment records. References. Police reports about theft." Clara's mind catalogued the room's geometry with the same precision she used for folding paper. Suite 404 occupied the northeast corner of the building's 4th floor. Behind the heavy velvet curtains disguising the far wall hung a service door, the discreet entrance maids used to avoid disturbing wealthy guests. 37 steps from where she stood. Mr. Thorne blocked the main entrance, but he couldn't cover both. "It's trash, Mr. Thorne." Clara's voice emerged steadier than her trembling hands. "Mr. Sterling folded these from scrap paper. Receipts and old letterhead. There's nothing. Sterling was a sentimental fool who couldn't let sleeping dogs lie. Mr. Thorne's face flushed a deep, blotchy crimson that spread down his neck. He thought he was clever, hiding his little accusations in plain sight. Playing games with paper and riddles like some demented child. The admission hung in the perfumed air between them. Clara's fingers tightened on the glass. Mr. Sterling, heiress, as he'd insisted she call him during their quiet afternoons in the hotel's forgotten corners, had been many things. Eccentric, certainly. Lonely, absolutely. But a fool? Never. Mr. Thorne lunged. Clara dropped to her knees. The Jared tilted dangerously as she slid across the polished marble, the chemical slick wax making her impromptu escape possible. She felt the wind of his coat sleeve as his grasping hand missed her shoulder by an inch. Her hip collided with the leg of a mahogany side table, sending a vase of lilies crashing to the floor. Water spread across marble in a glossy pool. She scrambled upright and wrenched open the service door hidden behind its velvet curtain, plunging into darkness. The service corridors wrapped around Suite 404 like industrial arteries, narrow passages lined with hissing steam pipes and caged light bulbs that flickered with epileptic uncertainty. The temperature jumped 15 degrees immediately. Clara's uniform stuck to her back as she ran, the humid air thick with the sharp bite of industrial bleach and laundry detergent. Behind her, Mr. Thorne's dress shoes hammered against concrete. "You're interfering with the natural order." His voice boomed through the corridors, amplified by metal walls. A small, insignificant girl ruining something so much larger than her understanding. Clara took the third branching corridor, ducking beneath a cluster of exposed pipes that forced her to bend nearly double. She heard Mr. Thorne collide with them, his curse echoing off the walls. These passages constituted her real home, far more than the cramped room she rented 3 blocks from the hotel. She'd memorized every turn during the 2 years since Mr. Sterling first hired her, back when she arrived with nothing except calloused hands and the desperate hope that precision and silence might earn her survival. "It's not malice, Mr. Thorne's voice cracked, climbing into a register that betrayed something beyond anger. Terror. "You don't comprehend what you're carrying. There are people, important people, who can't afford Sterling's posthumous games." Clara reached the vertical access, a steep metal staircase slicked with decades of accumulated grease and condensation. She climbed, her lungs burning, the glass jar growing heavier with each step. Her thighs screamed. The 1,000 cranes rustled inside their prison, a sound like wind through autumn leaves. A hand clamped around her ankle. Clara gasped, her free leg scrambling for purchase on the next step. Mr. Thorne's face appeared below her, twisted into something barely recognizable. Desperation stripped away his practiced veneer, revealing the raw, animal panic underneath. He yanked, trying to drag her back down into the darkness of the lower corridors. Clara kicked. Her boot heel connected with his shoulder. Mr. Thorne's grip broke. He stumbled backward against the metal railing, which rattled but held. Clara didn't wait to watch him recover. She hauled herself up the remaining steps, her shoulders burning, her vision narrowing to the strip of light visible beneath the door at the top. The lobby door burst open under her weight. Light flooded her vision, crystalline, brilliant, blinding after the dim corridors. Clara stumbled forward, blinking away tears, her feet sinking into carpet so thick it felt like running through sand. The grand lobby stretched before her, vaulted ceilings that amplified every sound into cathedral acoustics, black and white marble floors polished to mirror brightness, and the massive stone hearth where flames crackled with hypnotic intensity. Safety lay across the expanse. The front entrance. The street beyond. Freedom. Clara ran. Her toe snagged on the raised embroidery of the Persian rug. Time performed a strange deceleration. She felt herself pitching forward, her center of gravity shifting past the point of recovery. The jar slipped from her fingers as she twisted her body, every instinct screaming to protect Eris's final gift. Her shoulder hit the marble first. Air exploded from her lungs. The jar spun away, skittering across 20 feet of polished floor, its glass base ringing like a bell as it struck the marble pedestal supporting a bronze sculpture of some forgotten magnate. The lobby gasped, a collective intake of breath from the wealthy patrons scattered across velvet settees and leather armchairs. The jar wobbled. Spun. Settled. Intact. Clara pushed herself up on trembling arms, her vision swimming. Through the haze of pain and oxygen deprivation, she stared at the glass container resting against cold marble. Inside, 1,000 paper cranes remained perfectly preserved, their folded wings catching the chandelier light. Mr. Thorne exploded from the service door. His expensive suit hung torn and rumpled, his carefully slicked hair falling across his forehead in wild strands. He no longer resembled a hotel manager. He looked unhinged. Officers. He pointed a shaking finger at Clara. This woman has robbed the hotel. Seize her immediately. 2 police officers, previously stationed near the concierge desk in their navy uniforms, moved forward with practiced efficiency. Clara struggled to sit up, her ribs aching, as one officer's firm hand settled on her shoulder. Mr. Thorne. The second officer, older, with silver threading his temples, turned toward the manager. We didn't call for backup regarding any theft. Then I'm calling you now. Mr. Thorne gestured wildly at Clara. She's stolen private property from our archives. Disgruntled employee. Secure her in that jar before. Sir. The senior officer's voice carried the flat, immovable quality of someone accustomed to controlling chaotic situations. We're not here about an employee dispute. We're investigating a financial discrepancy. Multiple offshore transfers. Embezzlement. Fraud. The lobby's ambient noise, quiet conversations, the clink of teacups, rustling newspapers, died completely. We received documentation from Mr. Alastair Sterling. The officer consulted a small notebook. Timed email. Sent 4 hours before his death. Very thorough. Very detailed. Mr. Thorne's face drained of color, transitioning from blotchy crimson to a waxy, grayish pallor that made him resemble a department store mannequin. His mouth opened. Closed. His hand reached up to adjust his loosened tie in a gesture so automatic it seemed divorced from conscious thought. Sterling was senile, Mr. Thorne managed finally, his voice thin. Everyone at the hotel witnessed his decline. Paranoid delusions. Meaningless accusations against perfectly legitimate business practices. Federal investigators will determine legitimacy. The officer's tone remained neutral, professional. However, given your reaction and the mention of archives, perhaps you can explain your interest in this jar. Clara watched Mr. Thorne's expression cycle through calculations, visible behind his eyes like gears grinding in a damaged machine. When he spoke again, his voice carried a desperate cunning that made Clara's stomach turn. That's not a simple jar of paper birds, officer. Mr. Thorne's finger stabbed toward Clara and her treasure. That's Sterling's hidden ledger. Names. Dates. Account numbers. The old man coded everything into those cranes because he was paranoid about digital records. She's not some innocent maid, she's his accomplice, stealing evidence to protect the guilty parties. The senior officer's gaze shifted to the jar, then to Clara. Is this true, miss? Clara opened her mouth, but before she could respond, Mr. Thorne pressed his advantage, his words tumbling out in a frantic cascade. Arrest her. Log the jar as evidence. My legal team will decode Sterling's system and provide you with everything you need for your investigation. But you must secure it now, before his network has time to destroy what he hid. The officer's hand tightened slightly on Clara's shoulder. The polished marble beneath Clara's knees burned cold through her threadbare stockings. She pressed the glass jar tighter against her ribs, willing her racing pulse to quiet. Around her, the grand lobby swelled with movement, socialites rising from velvet settees, champagne flutes suspended mid-sip, the rustle of silk gowns creating a sound like distant rain. The cathedral ceiling amplified every whisper, every gasp, transforming them into accusations. Mr. Thorne straightened his torn jacket with trembling fingers, his face cycling through expressions too quickly for Clara to catalog. Humiliation. Rage. Calculation. He cleared his throat, and the sound echoed off the vaulted ceiling like a judge's gavel. Ladies and gentlemen. His voice carried the practiced boom of a stage actor, projecting up toward the mezzanine where more guests leaned over wrought iron railings. I apologize for this disruption to your evening. We have, unfortunately, discovered a thief among our trusted staff. Clara's stomach twisted. The circle of onlookers pressed closer, their expensive perfumes mingling into a cloying cloud. A woman in emerald silk wrinkled her nose, as though Clara's poverty carried a scent. Officers, please. Mr. Thorne gestured toward the senior policeman. Allow me a moment to demonstrate the extent of this employee's betrayal before you process her arrest. The officer's hand remained firm on Clara's shoulder, anchoring her to the floor. His partner shifted uncomfortably, glancing between Thorne's theatrical fury and Clara's silent stillness. Mr. Thorne, the senior officer began, we're here regarding your financial. Which makes this situation doubly relevant. Thorne cut him off, his voice rising. This girl has been working in collusion with Mr. Sterling's delusional schemes. She's attempting to steal evidence that would complicate your legitimate investigation. He produced a brass key from his vest pocket, holding it aloft like a prophet displaying a holy relic. Clara recognized the master key, the one opening every service locker in the building. Her breath caught. "Observe," Thorne announced, the pathetic hoarding of a disturbed mind. He strode toward the service corridor entrance tucked behind the reception desk, his expensive shoes clicking against marble. The crowd followed, drawn by the promise of spectacle. Clara felt the officer's grip loosen as he, too, was pulled into Thorne's orbit. She scrambled to her feet, the jar clutched against her chest, and followed. The small alcove housing employee locker smelled of industrial soap and rust. Clara's locker sat at the end, fourth from the bottom, its gray metal surface dented from years of careless elbows. Thorne inserted the master key with a flourish, wrenching the door open so violently the hinges screamed. Her life spilled across the floor in a cascade of humiliation. The threadbare cardigan, navy blue once, now faded to the color of old bruises, tumbled out first. Its right sleeve bore careful mending where Clara had torn it on a rough doorframe 3 months prior. She'd spent an entire evening stitching the wound closed with thread salvaged from a torn pillowcase. The tin containing her lunch, cold rice with a single preserved plum, clattered against the marble, its lid popping loose. Grains scattered like tiny pearls across the black and white checkerboard floor. 5 charcoal pencils, each worn to a stub barely longer than Clara's thumb, rolled in different directions. A woman in furs accidentally crushed one beneath her heel, leaving a smudge of black dust. Behold. Thorne's arm swept across the pathetic collection. The possessions of our noble artisan. Laughter rippled through the crowd, refined, polished laughter sharpened by champagne and boredom. Clara's face burned. She wanted to gather her belongings, to fold them back into the privacy of the locker, but the officer's returned grip on her arm prevented movement. Thorne reached into the locker's ventilation slats, his fingers closing around something delicate. He withdrew a paper crane Clara had crafted during her break 2 days prior, a tiny creation folded from a receipt she'd found in Sweet 312's wastebasket. The bird's wings bore the faint imprint of a coffee stain, its head slightly crushed from being wedged into the narrow vent. Trash art. Thorne dangled the crane by one wing, holding it at arm's length like a dead mouse. Our maid fancies herself an artist. She pollutes this establishment's prestige with her gutter-born trinkets. The crane twisted in his grip, its delicate creases beginning to separate. Clara watched a wing tear along its central fold, the paper threatening to unravel completely. She collects garbage, Thorne continued, warming to his performance. She fashions it into monuments to her poverty, then dares to claim such refuse as valuable. As worth protecting. More laughter. Harsher this time. A man near the back called out something Clara couldn't distinguish over the roaring in her ears. Thorne's heel came down on her cardigan. He ground the polished leather into the wool, twisting his foot as though extinguishing a cigarette. The fabric tore beneath his weight. Clara's vision narrowed. Her fingers tightened around the glass jar until her knuckles whitened. Erissa's voice echoed through her memory, soft, patient, infinitely kind, the smallest things, Clara. The smallest, most fragile things hold the greatest weight. Thorne's hand reached for the jar. Clara moved without conscious thought. She pivoted her body, using the momentum to break free from the officer's loosened grip. The jar disappeared behind her torso as she spun toward the grand lobby's expanse. Thorne lunged, his coffee-sour breath hot against her neck. His fingers clawed at her sleeve, tearing the fabric. They stumbled across the marble in a graceless tangle of limbs. Clara used the room's geometry against him, dodging behind the massive stone hearth where flames crackled with hypnotic intensity. Thorne followed, his coordination compromised by rage. She feinted left, then darted right, racing toward the brass-reinforced doors set into the wall opposite the fountain. The stationary vault. The hotel's internal archive. Clara crashed through the doors with enough force to rattle her teeth. The temperature dropped immediately. The vault stretched before her, a windowless chamber lined floor to ceiling with oak shelving holding centuries of ledgers, cardstock, and forgotten correspondence. The air tasted of ancient ink and cedar wood, thick and still as a tomb. She dove behind the central sorting table, a massive mahogany structure scarred by decades of paper cuts and spilled ink. Her lungs burned. She pressed the jar against her chest, fingers probing the glass for cracks. Intact. Eris's 1,000 cranes rustled inside their prison, wings catching the thin strip of light bleeding beneath the door. Footsteps. Heavy. Deliberate. The brass handle turned with a mechanical groan. Clara held her breath, willing herself invisible against the darkness. The door slammed. The sound exploded through the vault, reverberating off stone walls and oak shelves. The floor vibrated beneath Clara's knees. Her ears rang with the percussion of metal meeting metal as the external deadbolt slid home with a final, definitive click. "You'll stay there." Thorne's voice filtered through the wood, muffled but triumphant. "Stay there until my security arrives to dispose of you and your precious trash." His footsteps retreated. Silence rushed in to fill the void, absolute, suffocating silence broken only by Clara's ragged breathing. She set the jar carefully on the floor, then wrapped her arms around her ribs, forcing her lungs to slow their frantic rhythm. The darkness pressed against her eyes, dense and physical. Minutes stretched. The air grew stale. Clara stood, extending her hands to map the vault's dimensions through touch. Her fingers found the cold oak of shelving, traced the spine of a leather ledger dated 1873. She navigated by memory and instinct, moving toward the rear wall. A draft brushed her neck. Clara froze. The sensation repeated, cool air flowing against her skin in a rhythmic pulse, like breath. She turned slowly, following the current to its source. The draft intensified near a section of shelving holding financial records from the hotel's founding decade. She pressed her palm against the oak. The wood felt different here. Hollow. Her fingers explored the panel's edge, finding a recessed groove disguised as decorative molding. She hooked her fingertips into the gap and pulled. The shelf section swung inward on silent, greased hinges, not a door, but a performance. A masquerade of normalcy hiding architectural rebellion. Behind the heavy ledgers gaped a vertical cavity carved directly into the stone foundation. The space measured barely wide enough for a body turned sideways. Above, a shaft disappeared into darkness, illuminated at intervals by pinpricks of light filtering through ventilation grates. The draft originated here, flowing from some hidden source deep within the building's bones. Clara retrieved the jar, cradling it against her chest as she stepped into the crawlspace. The temperature dropped further. Her fingers touched rough-hewn stone, finding purchase on irregularities in the rock. As her eyes adjusted, she distinguished markings on the walls, charcoal sketches and architectural notations drawn with meticulous precision. Eris's handwriting. The sketches mapped the hotel's hidden geography, revealing service passages and vertical shafts invisible on official blueprints. Clara traced a diagram with her fingertip, recognizing the vault's layout and the crawlspace's connection to rooms above. Eris had designed these passages deliberately, creating arteries through which a person could navigate the building's skeleton without encountering a single guest. A narrow iron ladder emerged from the shadows, its rungs worn smooth by decades of use. Clara tested her weight on the lowest rung. It held. She climbed, her shoulders brushing stone on either side, the jar balanced precariously in the crook of her left arm. The shaft terminated at a brass-bound ventilation grate set into the wall at eye level. Warm light filtered through the slats, casting honeycomb patterns across Clara's face. She pressed close, peering through the narrow gaps. Thorne's office. The room sprawled below her vantage point, all chrome and glass and new money excess. Velvet curtains framed floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the lobby's mezzanine. Stolen antiquities cluttered shelves lining the walls. A fireplace burned with blue-tinged flames, its heat creating wavering distortions in the air. Thorne hunched over an oak desk, his back to the vent. Papers surrounded him in chaotic piles, yellowed ledgers, crisp wire transfer receipts, bound folders stamped confidential in red ink. His hands moved with frantic urgency, feeding sheets into a portable shredder positioned beside his chair. The machines mechanical were drifted up through the grate. Clara watched him grab a handful of documents and toss them into the fireplace. The flames consumed the evidence eagerly, paper blackening and curling, ink running like blood before disintegrating into ash. He muttered to himself, disconnected phrases Clara couldn't fully distinguish. Numbers. Names. Pleas to unnamed deities. She looked down at the jar in her hands, then at a partially visible crane near the top of the pile. The firelight filtering through the vent illuminated the paper's surface, revealing dense text printed beneath the origami folds. Dates. Account numbers. Transfer amounts. Clara's breath stopped. The scrap paper she'd salvaged for months, receipts and discarded letterhead retrieved from executive waste baskets during her cleaning rounds, weren't waste at all. They were the fragmented trail of Thorne's systematic embezzlement, thrown away in arrogant confidence no one would ever piece together the scattered evidence. Her fingers tightened around the glass. Inside, 1,000 paper cranes held the reconstructed mosaic of his guilt, preserved through kindness and precision, protected by patience and care. The smallest things. The most fragile things. The greatest weight. The ornate brass grate exploded outward with a shriek of tortured metal. Clara tumbled through the opening, her shoulder striking polished marble before her body could compensate for the drop. Pain lanced up her right ankle as her feet found purchase on a floor slick with evening condensation. The glass jar remained clutched against her ribs, miraculously intact, the paper cranes inside rustling their protest against the violent motion. Silence descended across the grand lobby like a curtain falling mid-performance. Clara straightened slowly, her torn uniform hanging from her frame in strips of gray fabric. Soot streaked her face in war paint patterns, residue from the crawlspace's ancient dust coating her exposed skin. Her hair had escaped its regulation pins, falling across her shoulders in dark tangles threaded with cobwebs. She stood at the base of the west wall, 15 feet below the ventilation shaft she descended from, surrounded by a sea of tailored suits and silk evening gowns frozen in attitudes of shocked disbelief. A champagne flute slipped from someone's fingers. The crystal shattered against marble, the sound detonating through the cathedral space like a gunshot. Clara's ankle screamed its objection as she shifted her weight, but she refused to acknowledge the injury. Her gaze swept the assembled crowd, socialites caught mid-conversation, waiters balancing sterling silver trays suspended at absurd angles, a string quartet near the mezzanine stairs with their bows hovering above silent instruments. Every eye had turned toward her interruption, transforming her from invisible servant into unavoidable spectacle. She raised her trembling hand and pointed directly at Thorne, who stood near the grand fireplace with a tumbler of amber liquid arrested halfway to his lips. The charade ends tonight. Clara's voice emerged raw from her throat, scraping against vocal cords she'd kept silent for too many years. The vaulted ceiling caught her words and amplified them, flinging her declaration into every corner of the vast space. Look at him. Look at the men you admire. Thorne's expression remained neutral, almost curious, as though observing an interesting insect that had crawled from beneath the baseboards. Clara unscrewed the jar's lid with shaking fingers. The paper crane spilled into her cupped palms, 50, 60, 70 delicate birds cascading over her knuckles in a waterfall of folded paper. She held them aloft, her arms extended toward the crowd like a priestess offering communion. These aren't toys. Her words gained strength as she spoke, each syllable building upon the last. These aren't the meaningless crafts of a bored employee. This is evidence. Proof. A ledger documenting systematic embezzlement spanning 5 years. Whispers erupted throughout the lobby, spreading from cluster to cluster like fire consuming dry kindling. A woman in midnight blue velvet leaned toward her companion's ear. A man with silver hair adjusted his spectacles, squinting at the cranes in Clara's hands. The string quartet exchanged glances, their instruments slowly lowering. Leonard Thorne used his access to sterling hotel accounts to create offshore shells. Clara advanced 3 steps toward the fireplace, her injured ankle protesting with each movement. He falsified maintenance records, invented phantom contractors, and rerouted guest payments into personal holdings. Heiress Sterling discovered the theft. These cranes, she raised the cluster higher, were Heiress's method of preserving the truth when traditional ledgers could be destroyed. Thorne set his tumbler down on the marble mantelpiece. The glass made contact with stone in a precise, chilling click that somehow penetrated the rising murmur of speculation. He turned to face Clara fully, his lips curling into a smile devoid of warmth or humor, a predator's expression worn by something pretending to be human. "Ladies and gentlemen." His voice carried the practiced modulation of someone accustomed to controlling rooms through sheer vocal presence. "Please forgive this distressing spectacle. Miss Clara has been under considerable strain since the unfortunate passing of Mr. Sterling." He stepped away from the fireplace, moving with deliberate slowness toward Clara's position. The crowd parted before him like water dividing around a ship's prow. Grief manifests in many forms. Thorne continued his advance, his tone dripping with manufactured sympathy. The human mind, when confronted with loss, sometimes constructs elaborate narratives to explain the inexplicable. Miss Clara cared deeply for Mr. Sterling. His death has clearly fractured her already fragile mental state. The whispers shifted. Clara heard the change in tenor, suspicion rotating away from Thorne's potential crimes and settling instead upon her apparent instability. A woman near the fountain whispered something behind her gloved hand. A portly gentleman shook his head with exaggerated sadness. The crowd's collective assessment of the situation was transforming before Clara's eyes, reshaped by Thorne's calculated calm. "She's lying." Clara's voice cracked. "He murdered Eris to hide." Two men in black suits materialized from the shadows flanking the lobby's eastern entrance. Not hotel security, their movements carried the precision of professional enforcement, broad shoulders filling tailored jackets without a wrinkle. Their faces displayed the studied neutrality of hired muscle accustomed to ugly work. Clara bolted. She pivoted on her good ankle, clutching the cranes against her chest, and sprinted toward the lobby's center. Cocktail tables became obstacles she vaulted over, sending arrangements of orchids tumbling to the floor. A silk-covered chair crashed sideways as she used it for leverage, its mahogany legs scraping marble. Behind her, the guard's footsteps thundered in pursuit, heavy, methodical, inevitable. The grand tear fountain loomed ahead, its three-tiered structure crowned by a bronze mermaid pouring water from an eternal urn. Clara plunged into the shallow basin without hesitation. The shock of cold water against her legs stole her breath, but she pushed forward, wading through ankle-deep water toward the fountain's far side. The guards reached the basin's edge and hesitated, their polished shoes and tailored suits ill-equipped for aquatic pursuit. One guard tested the water's edge. His leather sole found no purchase on the submerged marble, and he windmilled backward with a curse, landing hard on his tailbone. The second guard chose a different approach, circling the fountain's perimeter to cut Clara off at the opposite side. Clara scrambled over the basin's raised lip, her soaked hem clinging to her legs. She scanned the lobby desperately, searching for exits, allies, any fragment of hope in the sea of hostile faces. Her gaze snagged on a figure near the luggage trolleys, Leo, the young bellhop, frozen in place with his cap twisted between his hands. Leo had shared his meager lunches with Eris during the old man's final weeks. Leo had whispered warnings to Clara about Thorne's temper, his voice hushed in the service corridors where words couldn't be overheard. Leo was afraid, she could read the terror written across his angular features, but perhaps fear wasn't strong enough to completely smother kindness. The second guard was closing the distance, his hand reaching for Clara's shoulder. She made her decision in a heartbeat. Clara extracted the most elaborate crane from her cluster, a creation folded from vellum that caught the chandelier light and reflected it back in rainbow patterns. According to Eris's instructions, this particular bird contained primary account numbers encoded in its wing structure. She drew her arm back and hurled the crane through the air with every ounce of strength she possessed. "Leo!" Her scream tore through the lobby. "Run! Take it to the police!" The papered crane arced across the distance, spinning lazily end over end. Leo's hands came up instinctively, catching the delicate creation against his chest. His eyes widened as his fingers closed around the evidence, his gaze darting between Clara and the approaching guards and the maze of exits leading to freedom. For one suspended moment, Clara saw the possibility of victory flickering in Leo's expression. Then Thorne stepped into Leo's line of sight. The hotel manager didn't speak. He didn't need to. He simply stood there, his expensive suit immaculate, his hand extended palm up in an expectant gesture. Behind him, the fireplace cast his shadow across the marble floor, a dark stain reaching toward Leo's position like a physical manifestation of consequence. Leo's shoulders collapsed inward. His spirit crumbled so visibly Clara could almost hear the structural failure, the snapping of whatever fragile courage had existed beneath his fear. A sob escaped his throat, small, broken, ashamed. He walked forward and placed the crane into Thorne's palm. No. The word fell from Clara's lips as a whisper. Leo, no. The guard seized her arms, yanking them behind her back with bruising force. Clara's remaining cranes scattered across the marble, their wings spreading in a mockery of flight as they tumbled toward the fountain's edge. Thorne held the vellum crane between his thumb and forefinger, examining it the way an entomologist might study a particularly unremarkable moth. With theatrical deliberation, he began unfolding the paper, his thick fingers destroying months of careful creasing. The delicate structure collapsed, revealing a single rectangular sheet which Thorne spread flat against his palm. He turned the paper slowly, displaying both sides to the assembled crowd. The chandelier light illuminated every centimeter of the surface. Blank. Completely, agonizingly blank. Clara's stomach plummeted. In her desperate scramble through the crawlspace, she must have grabbed a decoy, or perhaps Eris had used some method of invisible notation she didn't understand how to reveal. The evidence existed, but the proof remained locked inside paper she couldn't access. Thorne's laughter started low, building into something dry and cruel that scraped against Clara's ears. He held the blank paper higher, ensuring every socialite could witness her failure. Behold. His voice dripped with mockery. The conclusive evidence of my crimes. A maid's fantasy, written in invisible ink that conveniently requires magic to appear. Scattered chuckles rippled through the crowd, nervous at first, then gaining confidence as Thorne's narrative reasserted its dominance over Clara's desperate accusations. The guards hauled Clara upright, forcing her to stand despite her injured ankle. Thorne approached until mere inches separated their faces. He spoke quietly, his words meant only for her ears. You were playing hero while my crew was feeding every ledger in the archive into industrial shredders. His breath carried the scent of expensive scotch. The truth existed, Clara. Past tense. Now it's confetti lining basement garbage bags. He straightened, reaching into his tuxedo's inner pocket. His fingers withdrew carefully, almost reverently, clutching something small against his chest. When his hand emerged fully into the light, Clara's heart stopped. The 1000th crane. Unlike its pristine siblings, this creation bore dark stains across its folded wings, rust-colored patches that could only be dried blood. Eris's blood. The final crane he'd been completing when Thorne arranged his accidental fall, the sacred relic marking the completion of a wish that would never be granted. Clara gasped, the sound raw and animal in her throat. Thorne's fingers closed around her chin, forcing her face upward while the guards maintained their iron grip on her arms. His eyes held nothing but contempt, the absolute certainty of someone who had won and desired his opponent to understand the totality of their defeat. The world operates on hierarchies you will never comprehend. Each word fell like a hammer blow. To everyone in this room, you rank below the dust you scrape from baseboards. You're a maid who plays with trash, Clara. Garbage recognizing garbage. Nothing more. He released her face with a dismissive flick, gesturing for the guards to move. They dragged Clara toward the massive stone fireplace where oak logs burned with volcanic intensity. Heat rolled across her skin in waves as they forced her to her knees on the raised hearth, close enough to feel individual tongues of flame reaching toward her face. Thorne stood above her, backlit by orange fire, silhouetted like something summoned from Clara's darkest nightmares. He dangled the blood-stained crane over the inferno, its delicate edges already beginning to brown and curl from proximity to the heat. Watch, he commanded. Watch your hope become ash. His fingers opened. No. Clara's scream tore from someplace deeper than her lungs, a sound containing every fragment of grief and rage and helpless despair. No, please. The 1000th crane tumbled into the flames. For one impossible heartbeat, the bloodstains flared brilliant blue, Eris's final wish burning bright before extinction. Then the paper blackened, curling into itself, disintegrating into gray flakes that the chimney's draft swept upward into darkness. Gone. Eris's legacy. The truth. Hope itself, reduced to smoke and carried away on currents of heated air. Thorne straightened his silk tie, the gesture casual, dismissive, complete. He'd accomplished his purpose. The lobby's assembled witnesses had seen Clara's evidence revealed as delusion, had watched her final desperate gambit collapse into theatrical failure. Clara collapsed forward, her forehead pressing against the hot stone of the hearth. Tears she'd been holding at bay for hours finally broke free, streaming down her soot-stained cheeks to evaporate against superheated marble. The guard's hands remained clamped on her shoulders, preventing escape, ensuring she remained kneeling in her defeat. Around her, conversation slowly resumed, voices tentatively discussing the evening's strange entertainment, already beginning the process of transforming tragedy into gossip to be shared at tomorrow's brunches. The string quartet recommenced playing, their instruments filling the lobby with melodies meant to restore normalcy. The fire crackled and popped, consuming wood and paper with equal indifference. Clara closed her eyes and wept. The fireplace roared with volcanic intensity, orange tongues of flame reaching upward toward the vaulted ceiling like desperate hands grasping for escape. Thorne positioned himself before the marble hearth, his expensive suit absorbing the heat in waves Clara could see distorting the air around his frame. In his trembling grip, and oh, how satisfying to witness those thick fingers shake, he held the 1000th crane, its iridescent vellum catching firelight and throwing rainbow patterns across his flushed face. 2 police officers flanked Clara's position, their hands heavy on her shoulders. Not restraining her violently, but firmly enough to communicate the inevitable conclusion: she would be leaving this lobby in handcuffs for trespassing, for disturbing the peace, for daring to accuse her betters of crimes she couldn't prove. Thorne's lips curled into something approximating a smile. The expression belonged on a skull. "You played your hand beautifully, Clara." His voice carried across the silent lobby, reaching every corner where staff and socialites pressed together in clusters of morbid fascination. Dramatic entrance. Passionate accusations. You almost had them believing your fairy tale. He dangled the crane over the flames. Heat began curling the delicate edges, browning the paper in advancing waves. But in the end, you're the punchline to a very old joke. The help, thinking she matters. Clara's ankle screamed protest where she twisted it during her fountain escape, but the physical pain registered as distant noise compared to the sharp clarity crystallizing in her mind. She stared at the crane in Thorne's grasp, watching how the firelight revealed subtle irregularities in its structure, places where the paper seemed thicker, reinforced, folded with intention beyond mere aesthetics. Memory crashed through her consciousness like a wave breaching a seawall. A rainy Tuesday. The basement workroom where industrial washers hummed their constant rhythm. Eris seated on an overturned bucket, his arthritic fingers moving with surprising grace across a square of unusual vellum. The paper possessed an odd weight, a stiffness foreign to standard origami stock. "Some folds are decorative, Clara." His voice had carried the playful lilt of someone sharing a magnificent secret. "Others are functional." The Japanese puzzle masters understood geometry as a language of locks and keys. He demonstrated the reverse squash fold, a technique requiring pressure applied at 3 specific points simultaneously. The paper had clicked as it settled into place, the sound mechanical rather than organic. Where others see art, the wise recognize architecture. Eris had winked, his fingers smoothing the final crease with deliberate care. The smallest container can hold the largest truth, if folded correctly. Clara's gaze snapped upward, focusing on the lead officer, a middle-aged man with salt and pepper hair and eyes trained to spot inconsistencies. He stood slightly apart from his partner, his attention divided between Clara's defeated posture and Thorne's theatrical display. "Officer." Her voice cut through the crackling fire with surgical precision. "The crane. Look at the wings." Thorne's hand jerked, the motion betraying his sudden panic. The lead officer's eyebrows lifted fractionally. "It's a locking mechanism." Clara strained against the hands holding her, her words tumbling out in controlled desperation. "The reverse squash fold, it's a Japanese puzzle technique. He's not burning trash, he's destroying evidence of felony embezzlement." "She's delusional," Thorne began. "Then why are you sweating?" Clara interrupted, her gaze locked on the expanding damp patches beneath Thorne's arms, the sheen coating his forehead. Why does a piece of worthless paper require immediate incineration? Why not let the officer examine it first? The lead officer's expression shifted, subtle, professional, but unmistakable. His instincts were engaging, the same neural pathways trained to recognize when a suspect protested too loudly, too quickly. He moved with surprising speed, stepping past Clara and intercepting Thorne's wrist mere inches above the consuming flames. His grip closed around expensive fabric and trembling flesh. "Sir, I'll need you to release the item." "This is ridiculous." Thorne's voice climbed toward hysteria. "I'm merely cleaning up clutter from a disturbed employee's breakdown." "Then you won't mind me examining the clutter?" The officer's tone allowed no argument. He pried the crane from Thorne's fingers with deliberate care, noting immediately the unusual heft, the reinforced texture along the folded wings. The paper possessed weight beyond its size, substance beyond decoration. Clara's heart hammered against her ribs. Around them, the lobby held its collective breath, waiters frozen mid-step, socialites suspended in postures of scandalized anticipation, the string quartet's instruments silent and waiting. "Officer, if you apply pressure to the base of the neck while sliding the left wing downward," Clara's instructions emerged calm despite the adrenaline flooding her system. "The reverse squash will release. Don't pull or tear. Let the geometry guide your hands." The officer followed her directions with methodical precision. His thick fingers found the pressure points, applying force where Clara indicated. The crane responded. A soft click echoed through the silent space, mechanical, deliberate, engineered. The officer's eyes widened fractionally as the paper began unfolding under his touch, not tearing or crumpling but expanding through a sequence of rhythmic releases. Each fold opened with another quiet click, the sound of hidden locks disengaging according to Eris's invisible blueprint. The transformation required 30 seconds. 30 seconds during which Thorne's face progressed from flushed pink to sickly gray, during which the assembled witnesses pressed closer, during which Clara's entire world balanced on the knife edge between vindication and absolute ruin. The crane finished its mechanical metamorphosis. Where once existed a delicate bird, the officer's palm cradled an elaborate map of vellum reinforced with nearly invisible silk threads. The craftsmanship bordered on impossible, engineering disguised as art, function hidden inside beauty. Something heavy tumbled from the unfolded interior, striking the officer's palm with a dull metallic thud. A platinum signet ring. The sterling family crest caught firelight and threw it back in defiant brilliance. Following the ring came a miniature book no larger than the officer's thumb, pages constructed from ultra-thin waterproof vellum, bound with silk thread matching the crane's reinforcement. The microledger. The lobby erupted into gasps and whispers. Thorne stumbled backward against the fireplace mantel, his expensive shoe catching on the raised hearth. Only his grip on the marble edge prevented complete collapse. "Impossible," he breathed. "I destroyed," the memos were. The 999 cranes scattered throughout this hotel weren't sentimental decorations, Clara said, her voice gaining strength as understanding bloomed across the faces surrounding her. Each bore a serial number. Each contained fragments of a cipher key. You mocked them as the ramblings of a dying man. She gestured toward the microledger in the officer's hand. Mr. Eris turned this entire building into a distributed database. Without the 1000th crane as the index, the ledger reads as gibberish. With it, she paused, letting the weight of revelation settle across the assembled crowd. Every transaction you ever tried to hide becomes transparent confession. The lead officer flipped open the tiny book, his eyes scanning pages covered in minute handwriting and numerical sequences. His partner released Clara's shoulder, moving instead toward Thorne's position. "I'll need you to come with us, sir." The second officer's hand rested on his handcuffs. "On what grounds?" Thorne's voice cracked. "You're taking the word of a maid over documented evidence of systematic embezzlement spanning a decade." The lead officer looked up from the ledger, his expression grim. "These entries detail offshore accounts, falsified maintenance records, diverted guest payments." He paused, flipping to another page. "Notes concerning the deliberate withholding of medication from Alistair Sterling." The whispers transformed into shocked exclamations. A woman near the fountain pressed her gloved hand to her mouth. A man in a charcoal suit shook his head slowly, his face contorted with disgust. "Turn around, Mr. Thorne." The handcuffs clicked into place, sharp, metallic, final. The sound echoed through the cathedral space with perfect clarity, drowning the fire's crackle and the crowd's gasps. The man who'd ruled this lobby through intimidation and fear stood diminished, shoulders collapsed inward, wrists bound behind his back. The lead officer cleared his throat, addressing the assembled witnesses with professional formality. Leonard Thorne, you're under arrest for grand larceny, embezzlement, evidence tampering, and conspiracy to commit murder. You have the right to remain. The massive oak doors leading to the street swung inward, admitting a sharp gust of evening air alongside a slender man in an impeccable charcoal suit. He carried a leather briefcase and moved with the efficient purpose of someone accustomed to crisis management. I'm Richard Pemberton, legal counsel for Sterling Global Enterprises. He addressed the lead officer with practiced courtesy. I apologize for the delayed arrival. Traffic from the airport was, he stopped mid-sentence, his gaze landing on the scene before him. I see the situation has already progressed significantly. And you are. The lead officer's tone remained neutral but suspicious. Pemberton extracted credentials from his breast pocket, offering them for inspection. I represent the estate of Alastair James Sterling, who until his death 3 weeks ago resided at this hotel under the alias Mr. Eris. A ripple of shock coursed through the lobby. Clara's breath caught. Eris, the eccentric guest who folded paper in basement corners, who smelled of peppermint and old books, had been Alastair Sterling. The Alastair Sterling, founder of an international hotel empire worth hundreds of millions. Mr. Sterling spent his final months conducting what he termed a character audit of his flagship property. Pemberton's voice carried clearly to every corner. He wished to determine which members of his staff valued the person over the position, who possessed integrity when authority figures weren't watching. The lawyer's gaze found Clara, his expression softening fractionally. According to his final communications, only one individual passed his examination. Pemberton opened his briefcase with practiced efficiency, withdrawing a document sealed with wax bearing the Sterling crest. He broke the seal and unfolded vellum pages covered in elegant script. This is a legally binding codicil to Mr. Sterling's last will and testament, signed and notarized 2 days before his death. It bequeaths the Sterling Grand Hotel and all associated assets to, he paused, scanning the page to confirm the name, Clara Mendez, whom he describes as possessing the true Sterling spirit, the ability to recognize value in what others discard and the integrity to protect those who cannot protect themselves. The silence following this pronouncement carried physical weight. Clara's vision tunneled, the edges of the lobby blurring while Pemberton's words echoed through her consciousness like stones dropped into a bottomless well. The hotel. Eris had given her the hotel. The second officer hauled Thorne toward the exit, but the disgraced manager planted his feet, twisting to face Clara with venom distorting his features into something barely human. Enjoy your trophy. He spat the words across the intervening distance. You're still what you've always been, a girl who cleans up other people's messes. No piece of paper changes your nature. Clara met his gaze without flinching. She glanced down at the contract in Pemberton's outstretched hand, then surveyed the soot-stained lobby floor, the scattered paper cranes littering marble like fallen snow, the ash smudges marking where a desperate flight had left evidence across pristine surfaces. She smiled, slow, genuine, carrying the quiet satisfaction of someone who discovered their purpose written in the stars. You're absolutely right, Mr. Thorne. Her voice emerged steady, musical with certainty. I am a cleaner. And I've decided to start my new position by taking out the trash. The officers dragged him through the oak doors into the night. His protests faded into the evening traffic's ambient noise, swallowed by a city that would forget his name within a week. Clara accepted the contract from Pemberton's hands, her calloused fingers, stained with years of industrial bleach and folding paper, closing around her impossible future with the same careful precision Eris had taught her. Outside, 1,000 cranes waited to be collected. Inside, a legacy unfolded one careful crease at a time.